Hello my dear sewing friends, it's Alisa here, and I'm just really happy to see you here, so thank you so much for tuning in. And today I wanted to share with you 11 dresses that I recently made. Each one of them is just a little bit different, but they're all made from exactly the same pattern. And I truly hope that a video like this will encourage you to explore your creativity, play around with your patterns, and discover your inner designer. Now, all of these dresses are going to be donated to, that's right, you guessed it right, to Project Dresser Girl. And if you've never heard about it, maybe you don't know what it is, then in a nutshell, it's a charity drive that runs through entire month of September, organized by Mari Sews, where we all join in, everybody with our skills, and we sew dresses for little girls who live in extreme poverty. So if by the end of this video you feel inspired, you want to help, and you want to join, then you will find all information that you will need, everything, in the description of this video. There you can also find the free pattern for all of the dresses that you're going to be seeing today. That's just one pattern with lots of little variations that you can come up with. Let's get started with this one because this dress has a special significance in this entire thing. This was actually the final prototype. So after I finalized all of the adjustments that I made to the original idea, because there were a couple of iterations, you will see some of them in a minute. After all of that was done, of course, I wanted to make one last prototype, one last sample, just to sort of cross my T's and dot my I's. And this was the dress. The fabric here is especially nice. This is cotton linen blend, all of these. And I also added a little bit of lace right here on the pockets and on the hem. And overall, it just gives me really warm, sort of like vintage vibes, perhaps. And then, if you remember, some time ago, I did pour my own buttons from resin, and I had these vintage crochet button molds that I wasn't necessarily a fan of, but I left the buttons that I poured from them thinking, you know, there might be a project where this would look really nice, and I think this is the project. And I had a couple of different colors. You will see some of them here in a minute as well, and I decided to add these clear ones, and I think that this really nicely complements the entire dress. As you can see, the dress is divided on the bottom half in 4 different parts. There are 2 side panels and 1 panel in the front, 1 panel in the back. There are really nice large pockets over here on the sides, and then on the top we have the front bodice and the back bodice with grown-on sleeves. Now this next dress has been made just from one fabric, so it is floral all over. And to make the definition of the side panels a little bit more visible, I did add contrasting bias tape around the pockets and on the neckline, and I also chose a really fun color for the thread. And I want to hold these 2 side by side because I find it always very interesting how you can use exactly the same pattern. These can be sewn by exactly the same person, and they were, but you can get a completely different garment by choosing different print and properties of the fabric. So here you go, 2 dresses that feel very different, and both are very lovely. They just have a different vibe about them. Here you also see a little bow in the front, so you can make that from fabric scraps, or you can also opt for little decorative buttons. And on the back, there is a little detail that was actually in the original prototype, and I'm actually going to remove it, but I left it so that way I can show it to you. If I stretch it, you'll be able to see that there's a little piece of elastic in the back. And the original idea was to have this so that way it's a little bit easier to pull the neckline over the head. But during the process of drafting and of course making a test garment, I realized 2 things. Number 1, when I tried this dress on my daughter, she kept doing this. And I quickly realized that that piece of elastic isn't necessarily comfortable on the back. So that was number 1. And number 2, the neckline as is actually pretty easy to pull over the head. So the elastic quickly became obsolete. So I removed it from the final pattern. There is another thing that is slightly different about this dress, and that is the sleeve. And in the original tutorial, we do bias tape on both, on the sleeve and on the neckline. But you can actually just add seam allowance to your sleeve, then serge it or zigzag it or overcast it, fold it under and top stitch it. That way you don't have to do bias tape on the sleeves if you don't want to, or maybe you're short on bias tape. So that is an extra option. It gives you exactly the same result in terms of the size of the bodice, but you have to remember to add that seam allowance so that way you can fold it under. What's fun about this dress is that, well, first of all, I do love the color combination. I just think it's so very cheerful. And number two, it has a ruffle on the bottom. Now, you haven't seen the ruffle added in the original tutorial for this year's dress, but you've seen it in the last year's dress, which is very, very similar to this one. But instead of grown-on sleeve, it had a strap. And on the bottom, I give you two options, just a regular hem or a ruffle. So I thought, you know what, let's do a ruffle on one of these dresses as well. So it can definitely be an option, especially if perhaps you don't have enough length to cut a long panel in the center and on the sides. You can definitely substitute it with a really fun ruffle. Here we have more fun handmade buttons. This time these are green, and I thought that this would match really nice all of the other colors of this dress. Now I know that this floral print is very, very busy and makes it really hard to see, but this dress actually has no side panels whatsoever. So instead of cutting apart the bottom part of the dress, it was actually cut all as one, and therefore only had two pattern pieces, the front and the back. Now, the reason why I designed this dress to be like this, there's actually a lot of reasons. One of them is because I know how kids can be a little bit rough on patch pockets. So this pocket not only comes together quite easily and quickly, but it's also quite sturdy because it's sandwiched between two seams. But I also wanted to divide this dress in multiple segments, so that way you can use up some of the fabric remnants and therefore create a really fun and colorful, cheerful design with lots of different colors, maybe lots of different prints, all in one. But I also realized that sometimes you might be overwhelmed with a lot of different details in a pattern, which I totally understand. Therefore, all you have to do is just cut it as is and create one on the front, one on the back. But then, of course, we have the issue of the pockets. And that really isn't an issue because then you can make patch pockets right over here. And those are just rectangles or squares with rounded corners on the bottom. The little heart applique was done by using a double-sided interfacing, but you can use regular interfacing without a problem. And then one of my friends, Agata from In Agata's Cottage, shared a picture with me where she made a little dress and she used a ton of different decorative stitches. So I got inspired and I finished it up with a decorative stitch, and I used the same applique and the same decorative stitch to finish the patch pockets on the bottom of the dress. So again, the same pattern in two different dresses. This one started out as a light blue. I know it's kind of hard to believe, right? Because this color just pops. It's so bright, it's so juicy. The name of the color is Hot Hibiscus. I promise I wasn't trying to match, but it is one of the colors that I used for ice dyeing this linen. And when I started working on this dress, I knew right away that I was going to change the color of the cotton because the light blue was just a little bit too light in practicality terms for a little kid. So I thought, why not? Let's just play around with it. But pattern-wise, it's exactly the same as in the original tutorial. There is one fun fact about it though. So fiber reactive dyes, which I used right over here, they do stick to natural fibers, cotton, linen, rayon, and such. And therefore, I had cotton thread, so I did everything with cotton thread, so that way it would dye it all together. And of course, I had to forget about something, right? That something was the white serger thread on the inside, so you can clearly see the polyester white thread that didn't dye and everything else that did. Trims is a really nice way how to add a little bit of pizzazz to any of the kids' clothing. And here I added a really fun pom-pom trim on the bottom. I could have done it on the pockets as well. I don't know why I didn't think about that. But it is there on the hem. Now this little dress was made exactly as the original pattern, but I wanted to mention a little point about these decorative buttons. On each of these, I did add a strip of interfacing behind them, so that way it will stabilize the fabric and therefore make it a little bit longer lasting and prevent damage to the fabric if the little one decides to sort of like pull on the buttons and play with them a little bit. From the first glance, it does look exactly the same as all of the other ones, but it has a little detail right here in the underarm section that is actually different. This was also one of the prototypes that didn't pass the scrutinizing testing and the final adjustments of the pattern, because I thought, you know what, it just makes no sense. Why don't we just remove this detail altogether? Now, originally there was this underarm curve from the grown-on sleeve onto the bodice, and that's just a typical thing that you see in designs like these. But because there was a separation between the bodice and the skirt, and the curve was just so tiny, it was a little challenging to sew and to sew it nicely. You know, in order to turn it out and have a perfect curve, you would need to clip into the seam allowance and therefore weaken the seam, and I wanted to avoid that. And then I thought, you know what? Why don't we just do the entire sleeve as one straight line, make it easy and straightforward, and then sew it into the skirt, and that's it. And that was the final pattern idea that I went through. But since I had this one made and it is functional, it is wearable, basically everything is the same, I just thought that logistically it would make it easier to sew the different design, especially in large quantities, like for example in this case 10-11 dresses. I think that the final design is way easier than this one. The last 3 dresses are made strictly by the pattern. They just have different color combinations of the fabric, and there is one thing that I have to add to them before I can send them over, and that is the Dress a Girl label. That, and also one thing, and I'm not sure if you have noticed or not, but for the past, I don't know, a month, maybe 2 months, maybe even longer, I've been doing small fabric scrap projects. And I mean, I always do some sort of fabric scrap projects, but these ones I made particularly with Dress a Girl in mind, because I want to add a little pouch like this, or maybe a little baggie like this with a scrunchie inside to each one of these little dresses in a pocket, so that way a little girl would have not only a little dress but also a little scrunchie and a little pouch where she can store her little treasures like sticks and rocks and feathers and, you know, whatever else we collected when we were kids and we deemed it our treasure and we guarded it and we stuck it in a pocket. So that way the little girl could do that as well, and I thought that could be a really nice use for any of the leftover fabric, so that way you could put something in a little pocket for a little girl to find as a little surprise. Now, if you want to learn more about Project Dress a Girl, then click right over here. And if you want to see all of the different ways how you can make kids' clothing so much more special with interesting details, then click right over here. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for all of your support. And until next time, happy, thoughtful sewing. I'll see you very soon. Bye!